We stream, we prompt, we trade. For most of us, we live in this ethereal, virtual world that feels completely untethered from the ground beneath us. But that digital reality, it's actually on a crash course with massive physical infrastructure. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating phenomenon we call the digital energy paradox. Our virtual lives are expanding infinitely, but we really have to ask, at what physical cost?
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the digital energy paradox, then look at Bitcoin's proof of work problem, followed by the AI data center boom. From there, we'll examine the massive fossil fuel strain, and finally, we'll wrap up with some really cool solutions for sustainable tech. Let's just jump right in.
Section 1. The digital energy paradox. Let's start by breaking a fundamental illusion pretty much all of us share about the internet.
Is the cloud actually physical?
I mean, we love to picture the cloud as this invisible, weightless space floating above us, right? It feels like magic. But the reality is incredibly grounded in concrete, steel, and copper. Behind every single digital prompt, every streaming 4K video, and every crypto transaction, there's a physical server rack, massive spinning cooling fans, and ultimately a power plant feeding the whole shebang. And this perfectly illustrates the shift we're seeing. The transition from simply retrieving information to actively generating it requires exponentially more computing power. To put that into perspective, a single ChatGPT query uses roughly 10 times the electricity of a traditional Google search. 10 times. That's because generative AI isn't just fetching a link from an index, it's running billions of complex calculations in real time to predict the exact next word in a sentence. We've essentially exhausted the historical efficiency margins of early data centers, and we're now entering a completely new era of surging, unprecedented power demand.
That brings us to Section 2, Bitcoin's proof of work problem. Now, what's really interesting about this physical footprint is how it scales up when we look at decentralized networks.
When you look at decentralized networks like Bitcoin, the sheer scale becomes absolutely staggering. If Bitcoin were a country, its annual electricity consumption of over 200 terawatt hours would rival the entire nation of Thailand. Its carbon footprint, that's comparable to the Czech Republic, and its fresh water usage matches Switzerland. This massive footprint is driven entirely by the proof of work algorithm, which requires specialized, incredibly power-hungry hardware to burn immense energy in a global competition, literally just to secure the network and verify blocks.
Unsurprisingly, this surging power demand has increasingly intersected with heavy public and regulatory scrutiny over its environmental impact. For example, when major mining operations were pushed out of China back in 2021, the network lost access to a ton of seasonal clean hydropower. The industry largely relocated to grids in the US and Kazakhstan, grids heavily reliant on fossil fuels. So, ironically, this geographical shift meant that while the network became more distributed, its overall carbon intensity actually bumped up significantly.
To make that environmental footprint truly tangible, just consider this. One single Bitcoin transaction evaporates over 13,000 liters of fresh water for data center cooling. Imagine an entire backyard swimming pool's worth of fresh water evaporated directly into the atmosphere just to process a single transaction on the blockchain. It's wild to think about.
So let's move on to Section 3, the AI data center boom, because cryptocurrency is absolutely not acting alone here.
580 terawatt hours. That is the high-end prediction for U.S. data center electricity demand by 2028. To put that massive number into perspective, that would represent up to 12% of total U.S. electricity consumption. The global footprint has skyrocketed from 500,000 data centers a decade ago to around 8 million today, largely fueled by this intense race to build hyperscale facilities for AI training. And you have to remember, these aren't your normal warehouses just storing old emails. They're immense hubs drawing unprecedented, continuous power to train massive neural networks.
AI's footprint cascades through multiple categories, way beyond just electricity. We've got direct physical impacts like water consumption and massive electronic waste. Advanced GPUs run incredibly hot and burn out quickly, leading to short operational lifespans and mountains of e-waste. Then we have indirect emissions from the AI-enabled applications themselves. And finally, there are higher-order societal effects, like how the sheer physical footprint and pollution burdens of these massive facilities can end up heavily concentrated in disadvantaged communities.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 4, fossil fuels and resource strain. As we combine the explosive growth of AI and crypto, we are hitting a severe physical bottleneck.
Our power grids are simply struggling to keep the lights on. This quote really highlights the climax of our paradox. The energy demands of data centers are actually giving utilities second thoughts about retiring coal. Because
Data centers require what's known as baseload power, meaning 24/7 uninterrupted electricity. Intermittent renewables like wind and solar aren't always enough to guarantee uptime. So, in our rush toward a high-tech future, we're being forced to revive the oldest, dirtiest fossil fuels just to guarantee grid stability.
Look at this number, 15. Nationwide in the U.S., 15 coal-fired power plants have seen their retirements actively delayed just to meet this new surge in digital demand. Collectively, these unretired plants pumped nearly 65 million tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere in a single year. We're essentially sacrificing long-term global climate goals for short-term computational capacity, keeping coal burning simply to power our servers.
This creates a devastating cycle known as the water energy nexus. To run high-density AI chips without physically melting the hardware, facilities have shifted to advanced evaporative liquid cooling. While this saves electricity compared to running massive air conditioning units, it dramatically increases freshwater consumption. It's a brutal trade-off. In hot, arid climates, this dynamic literally forces local residential communities to directly compete with tech giants for basic life-sustaining water resources.
But it's not a completely unsolvable problem. Section 5, Solutions for Sustainable Tech. We've seen the massive problems causing grid strain, so let's explore the regulatory and technological solutions designed to fix it. Let's start with crypto. Ethereum brilliantly proved that a massive structural shift is actually possible. By switching from the energy-intensive proof-of-work model to a proof-of-stake model, where coin owners mathematically validate blocks instead of power-hungry hardware competing to solve puzzles, Ethereum eliminated over 99.9% of its network's energy demand basically overnight. It's a stunning proof of concept that software protocols can be fundamentally rewritten to protect the physical environment.
Conversely, AI itself is emerging as a crucial tool to fix the very grid it strains. Machine learning models can seamlessly integrate massive amounts of weather data to perfectly predict wind and solar output, which helps solve the intermittency problem of renewables. They can also visually and mechanically detect equipment wear for predictive maintenance on wind turbines, and intelligently shave peak energy loads by routing power exactly where and when it's needed across smart grids. We're also seeing some really incredible infrastructural innovations on the ground. To get around that fossil fuel bottleneck, tech giants are co-locating data centers directly with nuclear power, like the recent agreements to restart 3 Mile Island to secure zero-carbon baseload energy. We're seeing modular data centers built directly next to remote wind and solar farms to utilize stranded power right at the source. And in crypto, mobile miners are literally being deployed to oil fields to capture and burn off waste methane gas, a severe superpollutant, turning it into electricity to run their rigs, rather than just letting it vent into the atmosphere. Which leaves us with this final, provocative question. As our virtual lives become infinitely more powerful, how do we ensure the physical planet isn't the price we pay? Is the immense utility of our digital footprint really worth its physical cost? And can we deploy these renewable solutions and innovations fast enough to keep it sustainable? Think about that the next time you ask an AI a question or verify a digital transaction. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.